So when I was in college, I was lost trying to figure out what I could possibly study. And I realized that electronics was the closest thing to magic that you could study. And I became an electrical engineer. And I still think it's magical. In the integrated circuit world, a chip is the thing that's in your phone, that's in everything now. Everything is controlled by chips. And different parts of them require different kind of circuitry, and so most of my patents are on chip circuits, different ways to do things that are an improvement over ways things have been done before. And that was what I was paid to do, so that's what I did.
So are those patents in your name then, or in the company's name?
So the majority of them are in the company name. A couple of them I'm the sole inventor on, but most of them it's a team. And if you look at patents that come out now from the chip industry, it's all lots and lots of people on them. That's just the way the industry has changed. But I've got several since I retired that are in my own name, one on a circuit and then the one I mentioned on sploids. Our son was young. He had lots of Legos, and he had lots of these hub and spoke toys called Connects in his room, and I thought there's got to be a way to play with those together. So this is a good example of the invention process and how it's okay to make mistakes. I started trying to find ways to have Legos work with Connects, and they don't have the same spacing. So my first attempt to put them together into one creation pulled itself apart because they don't match the spacings. If you try and force them to, they just pull apart. If you didn't have the sploids here at the top, you couldn't connect this to Lego. It just falls off, right? So I thought, well, how can I fix that? And I came up with the idea of what I ended up calling sploids, which are Lego-like brick pieces that have slots in them so you can slide the hubs from these hub and spoke toys directly into them. So for instance, underneath, one on the top with extra tall Lego pieces, and one on the side at a different angle. This is in the era prior to 3D printing. This was done 20 years ago. No 3D printing. So I glued and sawed Lego pieces together until I got the part I wanted. Then I learned how to mold plastic, and I molded parts for a while, and then I created CAD drawings and went to a machine shop and had a bunch of them machined, and then I sent it all to China and had it manufactured in China. I sold these on the internet for a number of years until it didn't make sense anymore, and now I don't. This is the Sploids Monster, which is on the web page, and be made with a very simple kit of sploids. There's a bunch of patterns on the website, different things, catapults and bridges and stuff like that.
One of the nonprofits that he joined in 1997 and is still a member of today is Toy Makers of Santa Cruz.
The video was made by John Hall and myself because we were members of the Santa Cruz Toy Makers, And the toy makers meet monthly, and we bring a toy we've made, and we donate them to local preschools. And we wanted more members. We still want more members. And one of our concerns was that people might think they had to have a workshop full of tools to be able to make toys. So we created that video, how to make a simple toy using all hand tools, and expensive hand tools. So a coping saw and electric drill, those kind of things that you might have anyway in your garage because you need to work around the house. So we created that video to show how simple it was to make just a car that you could then paint, or we have people who are members who do painting and then give away. But I couldn't be satisfied with just a simple car, so I created this, which is a puzzle car. And I think you also have pictures of a puzzle truck I've made. The idea behind this is that it looks like a car, and these are the headlights and the taillights on the vehicle, and yet they're just dowels that come out. And when those are out, the main body of the car comes out and separates into multiple pieces, like that. And it's a puzzle. And you put it back together, drop it in. You can see the top is like a jigsaw puzzle also. And then you can just put the dowels to hold it together and provide headlights and taillights. And there you go. So, along with toys, there's another type of thing called automata, which is mechanical toys that do interesting things, or they don't have to be toys, they could be big things. And I found one book that shows, had a pattern for a man playing a piano, and of course I had to adapt it. So this one's got a nice giraffe playing the piano, and he's playing the giraffe jig. And I added a few things to it because I thought just hands playing a piano, I mean, when you play a piano, you get into it, your whole body moves. So I made it so that the whole body of the giraffe beats with the music. So here he is, stomping his feet as he pounds on the piano. And we're going to turn this around. You can see there's a little tail there from the giraffe. And on this side is the hand crank for making the giraffe play the piano. So it's a silly thing. It's just something fun to do. Got a scroll saw, and I got interested in doing some woodworking. And one of the fun things to do with a scroll saw is something called Intarsia, and this is the classic book for Intarsia by Judy Gale Roberts. And there's lots of great patterns that you can make. So I got interested in doing some of that. And of course, like I mentioned before, it wasn't long before I had to do my own patterns. And I used to enter stuff in the county fair because it was fun. So here's an example of something that was the theme of the county fair one year called Let the Good Times Grow. So I thought music represented good times and a guitar, and then I built a musical staff, and instead of notes on the staff, I decided to put sunflowers because they were growing. So that was how I did that. And so Intarsia is sometimes called painting with wood. The idea is that you use all natural colors. You don't use any paint. So every piece you see that's a different color is either a different kind of wood with a different color or a different part of the wood. You often go for pieces that other people throw away because you're looking for character, you're looking for grain. And this particular piece, you see lots of red cedar. That's a very popular Intarsia wood. This is Douglas fir. This is walnut, and these are walnut, and this is yellow heart. So there's some examples of different kinds of wood that are cut. And it's three-dimensional. It's a three-dimensional picture, so it's not inlay, which is flat. That's what's the difference between Intarsia and inlay. So this is an example of a creation of mine. And then I started making some boxes, and here's another example. This is a sleeping dragon that I created. And then along the way, another thing I got interested in were called inversions. And one of the classic books by Scott Kim is this one, which is called Inversions. And the idea is that you write letters in such a way that they can be seen multiple ways. They could be seen the same word or a different word upside down. So I'm going to show you something interesting. If I take this book, you'll see it's Inversions by Scott Kim. And if I turn it upside down, it still says Inversions by Scott Kim. So that's one way. You could do it upside down. You can do mirror. You can do foreground and background, those kind of things. And I created this box that has my wife's initials on it. And if you turn it upside down, it's still KLS. And this happens to be made out of lace wood. It's a wood that keeps that fine grain pattern through the years. You know, my favorite story of the work of designing and creating the sploids is one day I was out working in the garage and our daughter was about, I don't know, 4 or 5. And I said, "Do you know what I do for a living?" And she says, "You cut up Legos." And I loved it. I was a chip engineer, but to her, I cut Legos up for a living. It was fun.
I thought Keith's daughter was onto something, so I decided to do a little research. It didn't take me long. I found that inventors, including one of Intel's founders, Robert Noyce, had cut up parts, such as transistors, to improve or advance functionality of the integrated system or the chip. That drove my curiosity to discover the creative process of the electronic engineer. Going back to ancient Greece, 600 BC wasn't really necessary, but the ancient Greeks, in particular Thales, considered Greek's first philosopher and scientist, discovered static electricity after rubbing fur on amber. Still, it would take over 1,000 years and many more discoveries and inventions before scientists discover electromagnetism and current electricity.
In 1946, moviegoers got their first glimpse of an astonishing new machine.
Are people becoming obsolete? A giant electronic brain has started cogitating at the University of Pennsylvania. It's made of vacuum tubes, like your radio, and it can add up a column of figures a yard long in a second. It's the world's first electronic computer. Right now, it's solving mathematical problems for the U.S. Army, but who knows? Someday a machine like this may check up on your income tax.
As revolutionary as the giant machine was, scientists were back in the lab trying to find ways to improve the computer by reducing the size and increase its reliability. First, they replaced the vacuum tubes with transistors. Then they invented the microchip to also increase acceleration. And finally, they invented the microprocessor to put the computer on a chip. Technology had truly entered the age of information. In 2010, Santa Cruz's Good Time newspaper featured Keith, an electrical engineer turned volunteer, as one making a difference. At the time, he had not only recently joined the group at our local community TV station, but was quickly elected to its board of directors, and by 2012 was elected the board's president. He immersed himself quietly but swiftly to keep the County Board of Supervisors and city from shutting down the station. The dilemma? DIFCA. The way I see it, DIFCA was a direct assault on the purpose of community TV and its free speech format. Until DIFCA, cable companies paid a fee to help with operational costs. With the paid facilitator laid off, no one was there to open and close the doors.
It was pretty drastic because everybody who I had been working with was losing their jobs. You know.
And we had no control about how people were laid off. And
Who did?
I assume it had to be the ED and from demands from the county and the city who, hold our contract. But, and also certain things were beyond their control because it was, determined by DIFCA.
And it took quite a bit of effort for everyone involved to understand what the law was going to do.
It's probably about a year or so into when all this changes started. We had reached the level where the station closed down because they were doing physical changes in that, and we were having training and using new equipment. And so I went through all that, and then I finally said, but it's not going to work for me, so I stopped.
It was, as you know, very trying period because people don't like change. I don't blame them. And yet the law required major changes in this organization.
Dues then were, I think, $20, $25 a year. For that, you had access to field cameras that you could take out without having to pay a rent, editing equipment which you could use without having to pay for it, a real studio which you could use without having to pay rent for it.
Let's face it, it was the best thing ever. You'd pay a small membership fee and you could produce as much as you wanted to.
Adapting his work table, Keith, as a board president, brainstormed with others the steps needed for the makeover.
He was clearly, one of the bastions of support for having community television not die or wither away.
With his creativity, with his, engineering experience, with his diehard understanding that public access is important, that he touched us and we touched him. And I don't like to put people on pedestals because, it's hard falling down. So, but he played such a major role, and he still does.
He's carried the station on his back. He has taken it as a pet project. It's Keith's studio, if you ask me.
Just as he had envisioned Legos and Connects working together, he and others envisioned the nonprofit CTV working with a for-profit company to make up for the loss of funding.
I mean, it took an enormous amount of work on the part of several people that are also no longer here, but where searching and searching, we finally came to this co-working space. And that was the best thing that happened to us, operating funds wise, because now we have operating money to have an ED and to pay for a bookkeeper and the insurance and all that. So we have that.
And so what I first would like to do is acknowledge Barbara for taking a heck of a leap with us. We approached her with this idea that had never been done, and we mixed a profit and a nonprofit, and we did, we don't know anything about co-working, but we thought it was a great idea, and so we wanted to find someone who had a proven track record.
These two people right here, Becca Reed and Keith Gudger, the executive director and the president of the board for CTV. These guys, well, Keith a few years before, but these people came to us about a year ago, maybe a bit more, year and a half ago, and said, our funding's changing, what community TV needs to do is changing, and approached us to do this partnership. And what this partnership enabled, because what the satellite does is create these community workspaces that enables small entrepreneurs to work together, but we're very highly automated so that they can run very efficiently. And what this meant was that the CTV mission, which is to make, public access more available to more and more of our local community, that by using what we had created with the satellite, we were going to make that even more available to the public. And I thought that was a brilliant vision that they had, and I'm very, very honored to be part of that.
I'd like to echo what Keith said about the support that we've gotten from the city and the county. Unbelievable. They've really, really stepped up and helped us quite a bit. But the unsung heroes here are the volunteers and members of CTV who actually did a ton of work. They packed up the whole old studio. They've held yard sales to deal with the old equipment. They put asset tags on hundreds of pieces of equipment and a lot of cables. You can imagine how many cables there are. And they put a number on every one. And they built a huge inventory to go into our fabulous software built by Barbara. So they've done a million thankless tasks. And so I would like to take this opportunity to thank them.
Okay, here we go. We're going to do on 3. If you count with me. 1, 2, 3. Hey!
I think Keith had asked me if I wanted to come back and do the show again. And he said that, they would find a way to, the things that had stopped me before, he thought that those could be worked out or whatever. And so I thought about it. And so I said, yeah, okay, I'll do that. And so he kind of, in a way, talked me into coming back to do the show. And that's like a little over 2 years ago now.
Keith joined other volunteers in about 2008. He started out as a crew member on other people's shows.
He was definitely around when I started Look Mom, I'm on TV. And I'd worked with him quite a bit. And he was kind of jack of all trades. And I liked the fact that he seemed to be proficient in most of the various tasks that are involved in producing the show, from doing camera to doing lights to doing audio, and also proficient enough that if you had problems that he would frequently know the answer to.
Everything we're doing video-wise involves something that I've worked with in the electrical engineering world. We're recording this video right now on flash memory, which I spent a big chunk of my early career working on, the forerunners to flash memory. And I've built lots of chips, and there's a chip in every camera, and there's a chip in all our audio equipment, there's chips in everything.
I would text Keith if I'm in trouble, and he'll get back to me right now, and help me out with whether the TriCaster has crashed, whether the audio is not working properly, whether the camera intercoms are not working. Whatever the problem is, he'll know exactly how to deal with it.
He soon moved to producing his own shows, including a show on woodworking.
Maple and mahoganies are the main choice of woods. And then the grain direction, nice quarter sawn piece, or as close to it as you can get. Mm-hmm. I like to have mine cut out and oversized and sitting around the shop as long as I can. Mm-hmm. A couple of years for a neck blank, just to be sitting around, going through a few climate changes. As stress, as you cut this out of a block, the stress is relieved. So because you don't want the neck to be twisting or moving after it's assembled.
One of his first shows was Science Fun.
So over the years, I've looked for ways to encourage students to do great science projects and science fairs, or to be involved in science in any way possible. And so when I got involved with community television, it seemed like a fun idea to have a TV show that would involve students with science and could be something that they could be proud of, and maybe they'd want to put on their application that they won or participated in a science television program. and the idea was to have tricky questions that could be answered but required the participants to think a little bit. I was fortunate I got to involve my whole family in it. One of the things my son did was provide the sound effects, so when the student got an answer wrong, we had a whole collection of weird sound effects, and when they got it right, we had, nice sound effects.
And I'll never forget when we first moved in, we used to get the radio station on almost every microphone. We'd get RF frequency, and it you'd be filming along, and all of a sudden, Keith solved that somehow, getting us wireless inside the control room, because at first your cell phones wouldn't work inside the control room. Nothing would work inside the control room. So Keith just deserves a lot of credit. We would not have a studio without Keith.
For his latest project, Keith designed a 1 to 2 person recording booth at the station. I myself have used it to conduct interviews, including for this show.
Our board had a retreat and decided that something like that would be really useful here in Santa Cruz. Yes, hopefully as a way to create funds, and we actually have people already using it, signing up and paying for it, but also as a way to involve more community. We hope to use it as a way to ask basically a question on the street, maybe at a First Friday event or something, have people stop in and say what they think about some current issue. So it was looked at as having that kind of studio would be a way to provide operating funds for the organization, but also continue to involve the community with the organization. And I looked around to see what others had done. Penn State has a great one-person studio, and so unfortunately it was kind of out of date and wouldn't work for us. But using all those ideas, we were able to build what we call the RSVP, the really simple video place where a person can go in, push a few buttons on the mouse, record a video to a flash drive, and walk out without any crew or anything other than just reading the instructions. A number of people contributed to it. We have a bunch of
As a producer at the station, Keith has put together over dozens of PSAs, that is, public service announcements, for local nonprofit organizations. He also produces Nonprofit Spotlight, a half-hour show running weekly.
Hi, I'm Steve Plates, and welcome to this edition of Nonprofit Spotlight. This is a production of our volunteer staff here and basically our volunteer advisory committee. And each month, we highlight a local nonprofit doing wonderful work in our community. And this week is especially exciting for me. This month is especially exciting for me because Rachel Kippen is here from Save Our Shores. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you as
You've
well.
been with us before, and we've talked about all the wonderful work that Save Our Shores does and has done for a long period of time, and particularly their annual coastal cleanup, which we'll talk about in a minute. But we have a little roll-in, so let's take a look at that, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about all this good work.
I'm Melanie Franklin, and I'm a longtime sanctuary steward with Save Our Shores. I've been a part of Save Our Shores since about 2012. I was walking beaches a lot and spending a lot of time at the beach, and started realizing as I looked around, wow, look, here's some trash, and I'd pick it up. Then I'd see more and pick it up, and before I knew it, I was just picking up bags of trash and realized maybe there's a way I can band together with other people. So I went online and I started doing some research, and I found the website for Save Our Shores. And their big emphasis that really drew me in is how to be a part of the solution.
I've written several mobile apps for different nonprofits just because it was fun to do. The one that's out there to play right now is the marine debris app for Save Our Shores. It's available in the App Store and Google Play. And it's a way for you, when you go to beach cleanup, to tally with your phone what you've picked up, and then it's automatically saved on Save Our Shores website so that then they have the information without you having to fill out a paper form, and then that data has to be entered. So you save paper and you save time, it gets entered automatically. I just added a feature this last few months where you can, with voice recognition, so if you pick up a cigarette butt, you can just press the button and say 1 cigarette butt, and it automatically tallies that for you, and you don't have to type it in anymore.
Is there something that the person gets for tallying? Are there points, and then do those points?
So you're asking, do I gamify the app? And no, I did not add gamification. We were at this point just trying to make sure that there was a simple way for people to enter the data without having to use paper and volunteer time to enter each by hand. So it's possible to use gamification, and it's a great idea, but at this point, no.
The greatest contribution is that he has the finger on the pulse and listen to what might be needed technically or program-wise, or bringing other people in. I think the finger on the pulse is important. And then persistence, 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 persistence. And coming up with solutions where a lot of us would have already stopped.